All right, let's dive into a really profound idea, one that challenges pretty much everything we think we know about who we are, what this world is, and, why we suffer. This is going to be fascinating. So, right out of the gate, we get this incredibly radical instruction. I mean, just think about your day so far. How much of it was spent forming opinions about other people, what they did, what they said? This teaching asks us to just drop all of it. Why? Well, because it's pointing to a reality that's completely different from the one we see every day. And that brings us to our first major idea here, what it means to step into a world that exists beyond our constant need to label everything as either good or bad. So the core idea is pretty mind-bending. If everything, and I mean everything, is one single self, then judging someone else is kind of like your left hand criticizing your right. It's a pointless distraction, right? It's an illusion that keeps us focused on all the tiny little waves instead of seeing the whole ocean. And look, this isn't just some nice philosophical idea. The text is very clear. This attachment to duality, this obsession with what we like and dislike in others, it literally causes us to fall away from our true spiritual purpose. We get so invested in all the little details of the dream that we completely forget we're the one dreaming it. Now, this all sounds very deep and profound, but there's a brilliant student in the text, Uddhava, who immediately spots a logical problem, and he asks a question that gets right to the very heart of human suffering. And there it is. That's the central question. If my true self, my soul, is eternal and pure, and my body is just this temporary vehicle, then who is this me that feels all the joy and the pain and the fear and the desire? It's a fantastic question, isn't it? Let's break down exactly why it's such a paradox. So here's the conflict, laid out side by side. On one side, you have the soul, pure, conscious, self-luminous, kind of like a fire. And on the other side, you've got the body, perishable, unconscious, like a piece of wood. So how can the fire experience the bondage of the wood? How can something perfect feel the suffering of something that's imperfect? This is the puzzle we've got to solve. Well, the answer to this paradox comes in the form of a really powerful analogy. To understand suffering, it turns out we first have to understand the nature of illusion itself. The answer lies in this key concept, the false ego, or ahankara. Now, this isn't about being arrogant. It's the fundamental mistake of thinking, I am this body, or I am these thoughts. This is the knot that ties the eternal soul to the temporary world, and it's the real source of all our suffering. And here's the analogy. The text explains that this experience of bondage is exactly like being in a dream. You know when you're having a nightmare, that fear you feel is 100% real. The monster chasing you feels solid. The danger feels like it's right there. The suffering is absolutely convincing, as long as you're asleep. And that's the punchline. The absolute instant you wake up, the nightmare just vanishes. It has no substance, no power, no reality. In the exact same way the text argues, the suffering we feel through the false ego has no real substance. It only feels real as long as we're asleep in the illusion of misidentification. And the text gets super specific here. All of these powerful emotions that basically define our daily lives, grief, joy, fear, you name it, even birth and death itself, they're all said to belong to the false ego. They are experiences of the dream, not the dreamer. They aren't properties of the true self at all. Now, this idea gets reinforced with a second, equally powerful metaphor, and this one really illustrates the eternal purity of the self. First, let's establish the nature of the soul. Just think of it as the sun. It's always shining, always present, a source of its own light. Its very nature is to be brilliant and pure. Okay, now think of everything else. Our thoughts, our ego, our sensory experiences, all our daily dramas. Think of them as clouds. They're just transient. They drift in, they change shape, and then they drift away. They have no permanent reality. And this brings us to the core insight. From our perspective down here on the ground, clouds can completely block the sun. It can feel like the sun is gone. But have those clouds actually affected the sun in any way? Have they stained it or dimmed it or even touched it? Of course not. No way. The sun is always there, shining brilliantly, totally beyond their reach. The text says the exact same thing is true of our real self. So, if we are not our suffering and our true self is like the sun, how do we actually live this truth? How do we break free from the illusion and actually experience that inner light? Well, the solution here is active. It's not passive. It involves using what's called the sword of knowledge, this clear, sharp ability to tell the difference between what's real and what's unreal, between the self and the false ego. But just having intellectual knowledge isn't enough. The text says this sword has to be sharpened by devotion. This implies that the path isn't just a mental exercise. It's a practice of the heart that gives our understanding its real power. The text also offers some very practical methods for this journey. Things like yogic postures to steady the mind, meditation, chanting, and, really importantly, following the example of those who've already walked the path. These are all presented as tools to help us clear away the clouds and finally wake up from the dream. And we'll end with this beautiful, summarizing verse. It describes the state of someone who actually succeeds on this path. They're free from desire, they're experiencing the bliss of their own true self, and they're never again obstructed by illusion. It leaves us with a really provocative question. If the suffering we feel isn't actually real, then what are we choosing to believe in every single day?
Welcome to the deep dive, where we take these really dense philosophical texts and try to pull out the insights you can actually use.
Exactly.
Today we are opening up an ancient text, Canto 11, chapter 28 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But think of this less as a religious text and more like a surprisingly modern user manual for your own mind.
It really is. And this deep dive is all about giving you a kind of shortcut. We want to get past the surface and go right to the core mechanics of existence. The goal is just clarity.
Right. Why do we suffer and how can we stop?
Pretty much. And the foundational idea, the one word we're going to keep coming back to, is ekatmakam.
Ekatmakam. Okay, what does that mean?
It just means one soul, or this idea of an underlying unity. The text says, right from the start, that everything we perceive as separate, good and bad, me and you, joy and grief.
All the dualities.
All of it. It's ultimately not real. It's an illusion. And real freedom, real liberation is just seeing the unity underneath it all.
Okay, so let's start with the most immediate, maybe the most controversial instruction right at the beginning.
It's a big one.
It's huge. The text commands that you should neither praise nor criticize the actions or the nature of other people. I mean, in a world built on judgment and hot takes, that is a massive ask. Why start there?
Well, because it's not really about being a good person. It's about seeing things accurately. For the wise person, judgment is. It's illogical.
How so?
Because they perceive that one soul, that ekatmakam, they see that everything comes from the same source, this combination of material nature, prakriti, and the supreme person, Puru.
Yeah.
So if it's all connected,
Then trying to separate things into good and bad is like trying to divide water with a knife.
you're trying to divide what's already whole.
Exactly. But the text puts such high stakes on this. It says if you do this, if you praise or criticize, you quickly fall from your own spiritual path. Why so fast? What's the mechanism there?
It's this condition the text calls asatya abhinivishata, which, is a mouthful, but it just means attachment to falsehood. So every time you judge, you're investing your belief and your energy into the idea that the illusion of separation is real. You're confirming it for yourself. And that belief, it immediately blinds you to the unity. That's the fall.
So we're really just talking about being attached to this illusion, this Maya. If you believe in all this diversity, you're walking right into the trap.
And it's a trap made of nothing. The text has this great analogy. It says these differences are as substantial as shadows or echoes or reflections in water.
They seem real, they can definitely scare you, but they have no substance.
None at all.
Yeah.
And yet, as you said, we spend our entire lives running from these shadows. They create this deep fear, this bhayam inside us, even when we sort of know they aren't real.
Which brings us to the next big question, right? If all this fear and suffering is happening inside an illusion, who is it happening to?
Exactly. Who is the one being trapped?
And that's where Uddhava, the questioner in the text, he sets up the perfect paradox. He asks, look, if the soul, the Atman, is pure and self-luminous, like a fire, and the body is just inert, like the wood it's burning, then whose experience is this? Who is actually going through all this material suffering?
It's the ultimate question. And the answer the text gives is that material existence only seems real and consequential.
It only has weight.
To the person who can't discriminate, the vivekina. It's a case of mistaken identity. As long as the soul wrongly identifies with the body and the senses, the meaningless seems meaningful.
Okay, so this is the crucial point for anyone listening. If the eternal pure soul isn't the one suffering, who is? Where is all that turbulence actually located?
It's located exclusively in what the text calls the ahakara, the false ego.
Just the ego.
Only the ego. The text is so clear on this. Grief, joy, fear, anger, greed, desire, even birth and death. All of it belongs to the false ego.
It does not touch the soul itself.
But hold on, if I say break my arm or lose someone I love, that feels very, very real. It doesn't feel like an ego problem, it feels like a me problem. I know. And that's because the living entity, the jiva, is defined as the pure self that is currently identifying with that whole structure, the body, the senses, the mind.
Okay.
Think of it like this. The soul is your computer's hardware. It's perfect, it's powerful, it's untouched. The false ego is the buggy software that's running. When the software crashes, grief, fear, whatever, the whole system feels it.
The hardware feels the heat.
It feels the heat because it's running the program.
Yeah.
But the hardware itself remains fundamentally undamaged. The software is the source of the glitch.
So suffering is a software glitch, not a hardware failure. Wow. That that gives you a lot of leverage, knowing the problem isn't fundamental to who you are.
It does.
But this is such a huge idea. How can anyone actually verify this? I mean, my own senses tell me the opposite every single day.
That's a great point. And the text anticipates that. It offers 7 different proofs that all point to the same conclusion. And they include things we trust, like knowledge, discrimination, direct perception, even tradition.
So it's not just blind faith.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The point is that all these different ways of knowing, when you follow them to their conclusion, they all agree. The underlying reality is singular and constant.
Which brings us to that incredible analogy to make this concrete, the gold analogy.
Yes, this is perfect for understanding it. So you have gold. It can be a raw lump. It can be a necklace. It can be a coin. It has different names, different forms.
Different function.
Right. But through all those changes, before, during, and after, what is it?
It's just gold.
It's always just gold.
Yeah.
In the same way, the Supreme Self is the single essence of everything in the world, no matter how many temporary names and forms it takes on.
And that helps explain why our normal states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, deep sleep, are also just temporary forms. The real you is the thing that perceives all three, the fourth state.
The Turiya, yes. And the rule of thumb is so profound. If something wasn't there in the beginning, and it won't be there in the end.
Then what's happening in the middle is just a temporary label, a mere designation.
Exactly. It's just a name we gave to the temporary shape of the gold.
Yeah.
And to really drive this home, the text gives us 2 more images. First, the sun and the clouds.
Right. The clouds can come and go. They can be stormy or light, but they don't affect the sun itself.
They don't touch the sun. And in the same way, our senses, whether they're active or resting, can't stain the pure self. And the second one is the sky. The self is like the sky, and all the elements, air, fire, water, are happening within it, but they don't affect the sky itself.
The sky is the container, not the contents.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So the practical job becomes, how do you stop identifying with the temporary contents and remember that you are the container?
Okay, so if this world is, as the text says, rootless, just a product of mind and speech and body, how do you cut through it?
You need a serious tool. The text calls it the sword of knowledge, the jnana. But there's a key detail.
What's that?
The sword has to be sharpened by devotion. Upasana ishitana.
So knowledge by itself is not enough? It can be dull?
Exactly. It needs the heat of practice, of devotion. And when it's sharp, that insight, that samikand, it destroys the ignorance in your intellect instantly. Like sunrise. The sun doesn't have to fight the darkness. Its very presence makes the darkness vanish.
But that sunrise doesn't always happen overnight. The text warns about a huge pitfall here, right?
Yeah.
Becoming the, what is it, the unsteady yogi?
The kuyoganam, yes. This is such a critical warning. Even if you have all this knowledge, if you still have some attachment, some residual desires,
The job isn't done.
the job isn't done. And those desires will come back like a disease that wasn't treated properly. It flares up again and pulls you right back into worldly thinking.
So what do you do? What's the first aid kit for when you're on the path and you inevitably get knocked off balance?
I love that you call it a first aid kit because that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
The text gives this really practical, diverse list of tools.
Okay.
First, you have your internal disciplines, things like yogic concentration and steady postures, grounding yourself.
Right.
Second, you can use external supports, things like austerities, chanting mantras, even medicinal herbs. And then finally, the most reliable path.
Devotion again.
Always meditating on the Lord, chanting holy names, or following the example of people who are already there, the perfected masters. You just use whatever works to get steady again.
Before we wrap up, there is one last, really subtle trap it warns about, and that's getting sidetracked by focusing on physical perfection.
Yes, the temptation to use these powerful practices just to build a perfect, long-lasting body.
A sukalpa, it says.
Right. And the text is blunt. It says this pursuit is futile. It's a parthika. If you don't have spiritual perfection, you've missed the entire point.
Why?
Because the body is transient. It's like a fruit on a tree. It will perish, no matter how perfect it looks. The wise person stays focused on the goal, that desireless state, that self-bliss, whether their body is perfect or not.
That's profound. So to bring this all together for you, the listener, it seems like there are three huge takeaways.
I think so.
First, that non-judgment is the entry point, because everything is fundamentally one. Ekatmakam.
Yes. Second, all your suffering, the grief, the fear, all of it, belongs only to the false ego. It's not happening to the real you.
And third, the way out is to use that sort of knowledge, but it absolutely has to be sharpened by your devotion, by your practice.
Couldn't say it better. And maybe we can leave you with the final thought from the text itself. It says, the delusion concerning the self is nothing but the dualistic conception within the pure self. Anything imagined apart from the self lacks real support and is but illusion.
So if the ultimate reality is, as it says, one without a second, the question for you to take away is, where does the illusion of scarcity or separation that guides your daily life, where does it actually exist? What imaginary supports are you still leaning on? Something to think about. Until next time.